Hi, my name is Chris and this is my video presentation on the creative storytelling unit. The first film we made was called All the Time in the World. It is about a man with severe OCD trying to make sure his day goes perfectly to schedule. However, when things start to go wrong in his day, he restarts his day using a watch that can turn back time. In this project, my role was lighting. We met most of the requirements when making this film, however the one we didn't meet was the required 3 actors, instead we had 2. One thing that went well in the film was how we decided to tackle the requirement of non-dialogue world building. This was done through our cinematography, which we did this by using fluid tracking shots and close-ups to focus on watches and other aspects of time. We also used the sound of a ticking clock constantly in the background throughout the film. This non-diegetic dialogue of the ticking helps set the monotonous tone and the structured and order schedule of our protagonist's day. One aspect of the film that could be improved was when our protagonist restarted his day, as this wasn't made clear enough to the audience and left them confused as to whether it was a new day or whether or not he restarted his day. This confusion caused audiences then to become confused with our ending, which was that the protagonist, because he turned back time, he never meets the woman and gets a date with her. This is a problem that could be fixed in the edit. I would have played the previous scenes in reverse at a faster pace, just like in the short film I'm You Dickhead, at 6 minutes 55 to 6 minutes 58. This would have cleared up what was happening to our audience and helped them get a better understanding of our ending. As mentioned earlier, my role in this film was lighting. When lighting these scenes, I used LED lights, so the indoor scenes didn't appear yellow. I also used a diffuser to make the shadows softer. This gave a cleaner look to the film, which mirrored our protagonist's clean and ordered lifestyle. When creating this film, we didn't actually apply any theories to our script when making it. This, in my opinion, is why a lot of the problems in our films, such as the lack of a clear story, occurred. If I were to recreate this film, I would apply Aristotle's 3-act structure to make the story and script more engaging to our audience. Act 1, which is a setup/inciting incident, would be an introduction to our protagonist's world and his daily routine. I would have time reset a few times to establish the power he has. During this time, I would also reveal that the character is lonely by having an empty table and having his house be quite bland and nothing around. This will create a goal for our protagonist that many audience members can relate to, allowing them to relate to the character and become more engaged in his story, as most people in their lives have had a point where they felt lonely and that no one else is around them. Act 2, which is the midpoint/confrontation, this would be where he actually meets the girl and arranges his date. Act 3, which would be our climax, which would be where, because he spoke to the girl, he misses his bus, and this forces him to restart his day. Then once his day is reset, he bumps into the girl, but this time he carries on walking. He doesn't stop because he wants to get his bus, which he just narrowly missed. He makes the bus, but then it cuts to him later on in the day, where he's eaten alone, and the chair at the table is still empty. The second film we made was called The Guardian. I was both the director and writer, but because we didn't have a writer, I also took on some producer roles, along with 2 others in my group. The film is about a brother who has failed to protect his sister, and as a result the sister has become a vampire. Now he tries to keep her alive, even if it means costing him his own humanity. The only restriction we had in this film was the time limit. This wasn't a problem, as the film was only 3 minutes 40. I had many inspirations whilst making this film, but the biggest inspiration I had was the Lart and Krebsley saga by Darren Shan. This is a series of books following a young vampire's journey as he grows up and becomes an adult in a world filled with vampires. These books inspired me and got me interested in the vampire world and horror genre from a very young age. One of the many films that inspired me was called Seccond 2. In the opening of the movie, it's set in a creepy woods with a roaring fire burning as the protagonist sits down just after he's lost all of his family. This heavily inspired the setting of my film. As a director, I wanted a dark and gritty look for my film. Visually, I was inspired by both Seccond 2 as well as the TV show Z Nation. As well as focusing on the dark and gritty colours in the movie, I also wanted to emphasise the red colour in the blood to make it stand out more. This was done in colour grading by my editor. As we shot in with a black magic, which only shoots flat, colour grading was very important in this piece. One of the things that went well whilst making this film was the cinematography. We used smooth camera movements, juxtaposed with shaky cam, to emphasise the scary nature of the film. Many of our shots were inspired by Silence of the Lambs. This, more specifically, the close-up on Hannibal Lecter's face during the interview. This was a creepy shot which made him look more scary and made the audience uneasy. We decided to recreate this for when the sisters revealed to be a vampire to help make the audience uneasy. Another thing that went well was lighting the night scenes in the woods. We used LED lights as well as diffusers and bounce boards. This was particularly important as we didn't want to lose any of the action happening in the scene because it was too dark. Most importantly, however, we did not overlight the scenes, which would have taken away from the horror aspect of our movie by making it less scary. The film was meant to be a tragedy, but due to the lack of character development, as well as the story being unclear to the audience, which made them less invested in the story and the tragic nature of the film lost. The unclear story was one of the criticisms brought up by my lecturers during the essay. When writing the script, I did try to stick to the main tropes of the tragedy genre, such as the hero's call, the divided self, and the moment of recognition. However, due to the unclear nature of the narrative, many of this was lost to the audience. If I could recreate the film, I would have the story be in a more linear order to make sure the audience understand what's happening. The first act, the hero's call, would be the brother trying to keep the sister alive. At this point, I would also introduce the threat of the vampires as an inciting incident, as one thing I also thought I failed to deliver on was non-dialogue world building. Although it wasn't a requirement, I feel like it would have benefited my film greatly to have included this, as it would have made it clearer to the audience what's going on. Act 2, which is the divided self / the darkest night for the protagonist, would be when the sister's killed and comes back as a vampire. He then makes a decision to keep her alive by killing others to feed to her. And finally, the climax, or the moment of recognition, this would actually be the brother accepting the monster he has to become in order to protect his sister. The tragic nature of the story is that he would sacrifice all of his humanity to keep the sister alive, even as a vampire. Throughout the story, I would focus more on the brother's moral struggle with taking lives and doing the monster to make it more effective and more impactful on the audience when he finally agrees to give in to becoming the monster for his sister. I mentioned earlier about using non-dialogue world building to set the world of the vampires. This would have raised tension for the audience, as they would have known throughout the film there is a constant threat of vampires. This is my second film I've directed at university, and I have improved a lot this term, as well as acting on the improvements from last term. I created a shot list so that we could be more efficient whilst filming on set. My storytelling ability has also improved this term, as I now realise that I must take myself out of the story when writing and filming, because I know the story and I'm seeing it with the eyes of someone who knows the plot. However, I have to remember that audiences don't know what I know, and I must think about watching the film with a fresh set of eyes to make sure the story is clear for a first-time viewer to understand. I also realise that in my future films, character development and having traits that are relatable to the audience are key and integral part of the story, as this increases the audience investment into your story.